See, your phone lights up with a text message, a last-minute cancellation for drinks tonight. A normal person might feel a sharp sting of rejection. You feel a massive physical wave of relief wash over you. You finally have your Friday night back. People love to diagnose this as a serious problem. They tell you to put yourself out there. They act like solitude is just a waiting room for a real life. It's not. You're actively choosing the quiet. You aren't retreating from the world out of fear. You're acting as a ruthless curator of your own life. You intentionally gatekeep your peace because you know exactly how expensive a casual 2-hour coffee date really is. You know your limits, and you refuse to cross them just to look normal. Look, part of this starts with the literal hardware in your head. In 2014, Dr. Bianca Acevedo at UC Santa Barbara published research on sensory processing sensitivity, and it completely reframes how we look at social fatigue. Most people have a built-in neural filter that blocks out background social noise, so they just hear the words being spoken. Your brain doesn't do that. You're simultaneously processing micro-expressions, subtle shifts in posture, the exact tone of someone's voice, and the ambient tension in the room. A casual 20-minute chat in a crowded cafe costs you the cognitive equivalent of a 3-hour exam. You walk into a loud, trendy restaurant to meet a group, and before you even sit down, your nervous system is mapping the entire room. And by the time you look at the menu, you're already calculating how soon you can leave. You aren't just hanging out. You're doing massive, involuntary data processing. But here's the twist nobody talks about. You don't hate people. You actually crave deep connection. You just can't survive the shallow, performative interactions required to get there. Science backs this up perfectly through your dopamine response. Research from the University of Minnesota on personality neurobiology reveals that the extroverted brain gets a massive, literal dopamine hit from novel, surface-level social interactions. They're chemically rewarded for mingling. Your brain simply doesn't trigger that same chemical payoff for small talk about the weather or someone's generic vacation. Your reward system is tuned exclusively to depth. All that casual socializing is all cost and zero chemical ROI. You're standing in the office kitchen while someone gives a painfully long update about their weekend golf trip. You nod and smile politely, but behind your eyes, your battery is violently draining into the red. Honestly, sometimes you catch yourself nodding at a story and realize you stopped actually listening 10 minutes ago because maintaining eye contact is taking all your remaining energy. You're spending precious mental currency on an interaction that gives you absolutely nothing back. But it actually gets weirder, and it explains why your solitude looks so strange to the outside world. Society expects people to crowdsource their comfort. When normal people get stressed, they call 3 friends, vent in a group chat, and use other people to regulate their nervous system. Research out of Durham University on solitude and emotion regulation shows that some people are fundamentally wired to auto-regulate. You drop your physiological arousal, your stress, by being entirely alone. You don't pull away from your friends because you're cold or distant. You retreat because absolute silence is your biological mechanism for processing reality. You get home from a chaotic workday, lock the front door, and drop your keys on the counter. You sit on the couch in complete silence for 45 minutes before you even think about turning on a light or looking at a screen. You don't need a sounding board. You need a sensory vacuum. I still don't fully get why society pathologizes this. We treat independence like a symptom of a disease just because it doesn't look loud. You've probably been told you're intimidating or hard to read. You aren't. You just don't need constant external validation to know who you are. You don't rely on an audience to exist. Here's the part society refuses to admit. We're obsessed with volume. We think someone with 100 friends is winning at life. But evolutionary psychologist Robin Dunbar from Oxford University mapped out the human brain's cognitive limit for relationships. You aren't failing to reach that quota, you're running a highly concentrated social economy. Instead of spreading your bandwidth across 100 fragile acquaintances, you reallocate all of that social energy into 2 or 3 ultra-high fidelity relationships. You trade a massive safety net for pure, unfiltered predictability. You'll happily ignore a buzzing group chat for 3 days straight without a shred of guilt. But if your one true friend calls you at 2 in the morning in a crisis, you're in the car driving to them before they even finish the sentence. You're deeply loyal, but access to you isn't cheap, and that's exactly what threatens people. They want you to be cheap and available. You refuse to lower your price just to fill up a dining room table. Look, I know the science perfectly justifies your behavior. It's beautiful, but let's be real. Sometimes this intense curation backfires. It's incredibly easy to confuse protecting your peace with just avoiding the massive, messy vulnerability required to let a new person into your life. You build a fortress, you forget to install a door. You spend months complaining that nobody really knows you, while actively refusing to let anyone see you when things get complicated. You cut people off at the first sign of friction because it's easier to be alone than to be misunderstood. That's the blind spot. You demand perfection from a deeply imperfect world. Some people optimize for belonging, others optimize for autonomy. You've simply chosen to guard your bandwidth because the world is entirely too loud, and that ability to filter the noise and protect your energy might be the real power most people never develop. Your lack of a massive friend group isn't a deficit you need to fix. It's a highly protective boundary you earned the hard way. You built that fortress to keep shallow interactions out. It worked perfectly, but now you're sitting inside wondering why the right people can't find you. It's the trap of your own design. But let's be perfectly clear about something. You aren't damaged for guarding your bandwidth like a hawk. Society wants you to be cheap, available, and constantly performing. You outright refuse to play that game. That isn't a personality flaw. That's a ruthless, necessary form of self-preservation. You're preserving the very best parts of yourself for the tiny handful of people who actually deserve to see them. Don't let anyone shame you for your quiet life. Are you actually protecting your peace, or are you just entirely done being misunderstood? Only you know the real answer to that. Subscribe if you're done apologizing for your boundaries.